While you are all here, Ms. VERA SHARAV.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. A little louder, closer. Closer? Okay. As I say, I get intimidated from technology.
It's like kissing somebody. I know you
No,
want to
I
kiss
know.
somebody.
Okay, everybody can help. As a Holocaust survivor, I and my friend Irene Tokay, whom I just met today, but we've been friends ever since I finally located her. She too is a survivor. And when you'll see my documentary, you'll see that other survivors as well agree with me. That we have a sacred obligation to the victims who did not survive. And that obligation is to warn others about ominous signs that threaten the freedom and the rights of individuals. Because these indicators can rapidly descend to genocide. Those of us who remember, and those of us who have studied the history of that period, recognize the warning signs and the relevance of the Holocaust to the current assault on the social, the economic, the political, the cultural, and the moral foundations of democracy. The tragedy is that most people don't comprehend. They don't comprehend the serious threat that is befallen us. The reason they don't see it is because they have no historical context. The globalists want you to forget history, because history teaches important lessons that are applicable today. There we go, another glitch. Chris? I say, always, sorry about that, but you have to forgive me, but that's how it is.
I think Bill Gates doesn't want you to talk.
I know, this is a microphone.
Exactly.
Okay, okay. So what is it they don't want you to compare? In January 1933, when Hitler took power, he declared a state of emergency and suspended the Constitution, personal freedom, freedom of the press, civil rights, and legal rights. The people in Germany were mesmerized and deluded by a barrage of fear-mongering propaganda about bogus threats and phantom enemies. The objective was to instill unquestioning obedience. The people's obedience enabled the Nazi regime to seize and maintain absolute power and control. The Holocaust did not begin with the gas chambers of Auschwitz or Treblinka. They were preceded by 9 years in which moral norms and human values were systematically obliterated. Incremental restrictions divided people into categories. Those deemed unworthy were stripped of their legal rights, their civil rights, and their human rights. Public silence and indifference to the plight of fellow human beings to be in discrimination and increased dehumanization. That's what facilitated the Holocaust. The Nazi system destroyed the social conscience of people. Hundreds of thousands of ordinary Germans participated in the dehumanization and the demolition of their own previously civilized society, and they sank into depravity. The objective of totalitarian regimes, whether fascist or communist, is to control all resources, natural resources, financial resources, and human resources. Not only are people enslaved physically and financially, but strict censorship conditions people to adapt an enslaved type of thinking. The concept of objective truth is eliminated. History, ethics, and science are falsified to eliminate contradictory information. Only the official narrative is permitted. Independent ideas are suppressed and declared as a threat to public safety. Official lies are upheld by a court police, today's fact checkers. The lies are widely disseminated as unimpeachable science. A collection of ready-made phrases and derogatory labels are used to denounce those who resist and adhere to forbidden concepts. Anti-vaxxer, spreader of misinformation, conspiracy theorist. Religion is sidelined and eventually banned. Family ties and family values are undermined. Children are taught that allegiance to the state takes precedence over parents. Oops, there we go. Sorry. Sorry. Okay, sort of. Yeah, I told you that, but. Okay. See, it keeps on doing it. I'm sorry, people, I'm really, really sorry.
We will wait all night.
All right, thank you, I know. You know, it's a little hard history of today. Okay. These past 3 years, it's been a master class in how a dictatorship crushes democracy. We're seeing it firsthand. Believe what you see and what you're experiencing. The COVID pandemic provided a sobering glimpse of nascent centralized dictatorship. In 2020, the World Health Organization declared a pandemic. Under the pretext of a public health threat, the WHO issued, well, you know what they issued.
Still
They're
issuing.
Yeah, they're still issuing. See what goes on? Oh, we didn't want to go this. Okay, good. See? It worked back there, you know? Gates are earlier? No? Okay. The WHO's recommendations were followed in lockstep, as we remember, all across the world, in Western Europe, Australia, Canada, United States, Israel, Singapore. Overnight, our freedom and all our rights were suspended. Local businesses were shut down as non-essential, whereas multinational corporations were declared essential. Human beings were also assigned a value, essential versus non-essential. This concept of non-essential members of society bears a chilling similarity to the Nazi designation worthless eaters who were medically murdered. Most thoughtful survivors, including Auschwitz survivor and Nobel laureate Elie Wiesel, warned that another Holocaust can happen again if we ignore the early signs and remain silent about human rights violations. My mission today is to awaken people to the reality that it is not the virus they need to fear, but rather the rapid implementation of the globalist agenda. The objective is the demolition of democracy, the elimination of most of the human population, and the digital enslavement of the rest. The United Nations sponsored a high-level panel on digital cooperation. It was co-chaired by Melinda Gates of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and Jack Ma, creator of China's social credit scoring system. These radical technocrats are launching a digitalization to gain total control of mankind. They're not just bragging. No one believed Hitler's threats either. The objective of the COVID restrictions has never been to protect people's life or health. The primary objective has been to expand central executive power to prepare for a global regime change, the Great Reset, or the New World Order. Not a single government-dictated COVID policy or directive had any preventive therapeutic efficacy whatsoever. The policies contradicted all known rational methods of infection containment. Lockdown, isolation, masks, vaccine mandates were cruel ploys to instill fear and obedience and to wreak havoc on millions of people's lives. Children have been cruelly conditioned to fear people and the human face. The elderly were forced into solitary confinement. They were medically murdered with lethal doses of midazolam and other opiates. All of these inhumane measures were ordered on the basis of a bald lie promulgated by the World Health Organization. In 2021, the WHO endorsed grossly unethical mass medical experiment without people's informed consent, which is in gross violation of the Nuremberg Code, which was adopted at the end of the doctor's trial in 1947. Hundreds of millions of people have been injected with an experimental gene transfer technology, a technology associated with systemic inflammation, and when tested in animals, they died. The content of these countermeasures, as they're legally actually called, remains a military secret. Human death toll and the serious injuries is mounting every single day, including thousands of children who were never at risk at all from this so-called pandemic. The evidence that this pandemic was a fake pandemic is now documented by national all-cause mortality data. A Canadian report by Dr. Dennis Rancourt analyzed the all-cause mortality and vaccine rollout data from Israel and Australia. The data is clear. The death rate among the elderly, who were the earliest ones exposed to this injection, their death rate rose dramatically. Another just released report by a group of prominent UK doctors and scientists concluded that in 2020, and I quote, global mortality data show no evidence of a global pandemic. Total fake. No difference between 2 and 3 earlier years. We're now currently under siege. Yet most people are oblivious to the impending global human catastrophe. The United Nations recently published 3 new policy briefs to provide more detail on certain proposals contained in what they call our common agenda. Have you ever heard of it? Of course not. Our common agenda. So U.S. Secretary, it's really trying to trip me. No, I'm sort of, I'm trying to keep the reins to help me. So the UN Secretary General's vision for the future will be decided at the Summit of the Future in September 2024. These briefings include the Global Digital Compact, reforms to the international financial architecture, and the future of outer space governance. They've got big plans. None of these restructure planners asked our permission. Have you ever heard of it? Just keep remembering how the WHO issued the pandemic declaration and what happened. Those who have studied these proposals, and I have not read all of them, believe me, they're horrified by the radical, inhumane course that is set for our future. Simultaneously, the WHO is seeking to amend the 2005 International Health Regulations. This is an entrapment scheme. If ratified, these amendments would fundamentally undermine the independence of sovereign national governments and gain total control of the global population. No government interference. The WHO would eliminate the right to personal autonomy. The Director General would be empowered to impose sweeping, unilateral, legally binding directives that every member states of the WHO and their citizens would be obliged to follow. These far-ranging mandates would override national safety requirements for vaccines, medical devices, diagnostics, and experimental gene-based therapies, which up to now, up to COVID, had required a whole extra layer of oversight and evidence of safety. All that was thrown by the wayside with COVID, and now they want to do it for everything from here on in. There it goes again. Sorry, never quite acted this bad, but I guess